for this conversation, and then we'll take it up from there. And I would also want to encourage that as I share some of the things I'll talk about this morning, as well as Janki will likewise, please do well to have questions or contributions perhaps that you want to add to the conversation, or areas that perhaps need extra probing that would meet your own need. Then I would be very much happy to also talk about. Now, before I yield the mic to Janki, I would want to talk about two aspects of this conversation. Of course, we had the limited scope to discuss this morning, and one of which is making research accessible. Since the conversation, like Evergreen has talked about, Resonance is really particular about research and its accessibility. And it begs the question, how do we make research accessible? How do we simplify research such that they are easily consumed, and then the public also make use of research findings? It is one thing for you to come up with really groundbreaking ideas and innovation. It's another thing for that particular innovation or that research output to be useful to the public here. One of the questions I asked when I was an undergraduate student was how that I stumbled into a room where we had a number of dissertations from both undergraduate and postgraduate students, and we just had those projects, like we call them, dumped in the room. And then it begs the question, is this not just a waste of resources? And how exactly are these research outputs being used at the end of the day? So you see that it's commonplace in our society that research is just being carried out, and then at the end of the day, oftentimes nothing is done about it. Yeah, it just doesn't go beyond the four walls of the institution. So as an undergraduate student, most likely you completed your project, and then that was the end of it. In fact, if I should do a quick survey on this call, I can be quite sure that a number of us would not even remember the title of our undergraduate research that was done. And that's quite pathetic, because research is not just to be done for the activity alone. Yeah, research should lead to innovation. Research should lead to change. And so when you come up with really impressive ideas, it's a lot to talk about, because I think the concept of research has really been bastardized, as people just do it as a requirement to get out of school. A number of other persons just do it because they are mandated to. But research is for you to investigate into a particular problem that you've identified, either propose a solution, or you contribute knowledge that would advance that particular field or add to the understanding of a particular subject matter. That's what research is about. But most times you just see people just do something and then just move on from there. And then it begs the question, if we know that research is really important, if we know that if we must have change, research is quintessential, then it begs the question, how then do we make research accessible? Now, to make research accessible, the first thing you want to take into consideration is you need to understand your audience. Yeah, the understanding of your audience is crucial. Now, by understanding your audience, I mean, when we were undergraduate students, we basically thought we were doing the research just to make our supervisors happy and to make perhaps the graduate committee just grant us the pass to leave the institutions as graduates. Yeah, but beyond that, you get to the point where now I see research as there is a particular problem. I'm investigating into this problem, one, to better understand it, two, to reveal innovation and developmental efforts that could come from that effort of having to investigate that issue, and then to now give propositions to relevant stakeholders to be able to address that. Now, since I know that I'm already looking at it, if I want to cause a form of change, the people that want to be affected now are the general population, which is like the common person. Yeah, I want to influence the common person. That's one. And secondly, I want to also contribute to the academia. Yeah, and that's one thing we call knowledge production. So your research at the end of the day wants to contribute to knowledge. Yeah, so knowledge production to the academia. So now I'm listing my target audience to be first of the common population, Secondly, the academia. So these are like experts within my field and even beyond. And then I'm also looking at policymakers, because at the end of the day, the propositions I would make from my research are intended to influence policies. Yeah. And I also want to, now, depending on what issue I investigate, then there will be other stakeholders that would find my findings relevant. Yeah. And that's one thing that maybe I should just stop by a bit at this junction, to say that when you carry out the research, understand your stakeholders. Yeah. The people who will need the results of your research. Yeah. The people who would consider that result important to them. Then these will be the people that would make up your target audience. Now, knowing your target audience will now help you to tailor your content and to tailor the outcome of your research directly to the target audience. And that's when you see that, so we have the IPCC report. Yeah, if you're familiar with climate change processes, that's the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. They would release a very bulky report that is just meant to support knowledge production. But then at the end of the day, they will create another excerpt and they will call it summary for policymakers. Now, the policymakers are not necessarily encumbered with having to study the whole 200 to 300 pages of the entire report. They are basically just content with about 50 pages of the one titled Summary for Policymakers. Then it begs the question, how do I now tailor the outcome of my research to the stakeholder that I consider relevant? So at the end of the day, if I want to tailor my research to a general population, rather than have my research in the general form, I could simply convert that research into a blog post that speaks to people. So the general public who is reading this would see that, oh, this is the issue that was looked at, and this was things that were found. And maybe this is like an innovation that is also being proposed and they can easily adopt it. Now, this is me speaking in the language that the people understand, rather than going all the way to give everyone and say, okay, this is the research I did. It was published in the Journal of Epidemiology. It was published in the Journal of Climate Change. I'll go check it out using my index number. I'll go check it out using my... The people don't understand these things. Yeah, the people don't understand if you have a Google Scholar profile, as it were. But the people read basic blog posts. They read Twitter posts. They read Instagram short posts. They see pictures. They see images. They will follow me on LinkedIn. They will see the things I post there. And this is just me bringing my research all the way from where it is to the level with which people can relate with those findings. Yeah. So what I just do is I look at my research output. I simplify it to the simplest form possible that would help the understanding of now. Remember, I said we have the group that we would call the common persons. Yeah. So I simplify it in such a way that every common person that reads it will definitely understand and have something to take on with. If there is a standout innovation there, I make it very pronounced, and then people see it and then they're able to note it. Yeah. Now that is having to tailor it to your audience. Now, if I am giving such communication to the common person, I wouldn't also give that communication in that manner to the academic population. For instance, if I want to communicate my research findings now to a group of academia, yeah, or a group of people in the academia rather, I want to now design it in formats that the academic sector understands. Now, that would mean I want to make it into a conference paper. Yeah, I want to have an abstract. I want to have a full publication at the end of the day. Sorry about that. I want to have a full publication at the end of the day that will be published on any of these journals and made available online. So through which other researchers can search for related items, find it, and then use it as deemed fit. I want to present at conferences and all of those academic related things. But beyond the academia now, I want to now communicate to policymakers. I want to communicate to founders of NGOs. I want to communicate that same output with civil society organizations. Then it begs the question, how then do I? These people are not concerned about having to read your 32 pages publications. Yeah. So the next thing you want to do now is, since I want to talk to policymakers, then the basic thing I want to share are the findings of that study and the implication that that study has for policy. Yeah, because say for instance, I do an investigation. I'm sorry, I would have to focus on my field right now. I do an investigation and then I find that climate change is actually leading to the fast degradation of forest within a particular community, for instance. And then I would convert that output now to the fact that it needs to be enforced, that afforestation exercise should be carried out, as well as policies that frowns at forest degradation should be enforced. Now, I can't do that enforcing by myself, but if I communicate that particular policy implication well and sound enough to the relevant stakeholders, it can be taken up from there. Yeah. So this now brings me to the part of, so you need to have different forms of output for different audience from a particular research. So I'm done with my research. I could do well to publish it. Good for me. What I've just done is I have given that research to the academic audience. Yeah. Now, how do I give the research now to the general public? The way to do that is just to now convert bits and pieces of that research into tweets, into posts, into maybe voiceovers. I could just do a quick video from the event I investigated and everything, just do a voiceover, communicate it to the public, or I just do a quick draft, a summary post, and then share it with civil society organizations. I share it with non-profit organizations, and then I do a summary draft, what we call policy brief. Yeah, you could do a policy brief and then try to convert or send across your policy brief to relevant stakeholders or people who are within the decision making sphere. And that's one thing you must consider. Your research goes beyond just having to end up as a publication. You can transform it into different formats that can be used by different stakeholders, and that way your story will be able to go wider than just being limited to a particular set of audience. Then the next thing you also want to leverage is the ability of people to enjoy stories. Yeah. So if I give you a typical research publication, the first thing you will see is you see an abstract, and then the abstract might be basically start from perhaps due to the devastating effects of cyclones and hurricanes in the, and somehow for a typical man, a typical or layman rather, you already find that very boring. Yeah. But then I want the particular audience to now understand what I'm talking about. And then you start by storytelling. Yeah. So storytelling is also one means you can use to create a compelling narrative. You have a big idea. Yeah, you have big discoveries that you've made, but people would not necessarily read those things except you go the extra mile to make those things enjoyable to them. Yeah. So you now want to convert what you have found to stories that you want to tell. Now, when you go ahead to selling these stories, then people would better understand and better be drawn to that which you've done. And that's thankfully one thing I have been trying to focus on across my social media platforms, the ability to be able to tell stories that goes beyond just what you have achieved, but what you have been working on, what you are doing, and the contributions you're making. And that way, people kind of relate better with these stories that you tell. So beyond just telling stories about yourself and your achievements and everything, as LinkedIn has almost appeared as such, you can as well tell stories of how that you went into a particular community and how that you saw this and that, and then you thought and then you investigated and this is what you found. You could also say how that one idea struck you and then you thought of how you could combine this in the laboratory. You did this and that and it resulted in this, and voila, you've come up with a great innovation. You're seeking for sponsorship. And that's one other thing I'll be talking about, because research is supposed to be the backbone of development. Yeah, where having found these big discoveries that came from your big ideas, you can then see how to leverage that discovery to attract funding, to now start a project, to in fact from that onset build a brand for yourself. One of the things you want to do, for instance, and conversations like this, if I were not talking about research and innovation, perhaps I could have also gotten an invite to speak about the findings from my own research, because I've had the opportunity to do likewise. So for some people, once you tell your story, and this thing is perhaps in series and then they're all interconnected. Once you tell your stories online, perhaps on LinkedIn, for example, the next thing is that you find civil society organizations or NGOs who are really excited about what you've shared. And they want the audience, the public, to know better about those things. And then the next thing is that they want to invite you perhaps to a show. They want to invite you to a speaking opportunity like this. They want to invite you over to a podcast. And then that way, it just gives you the opportunity to speak to these issues. This is what you did. You have this innovation, you discovered this, and then all you're left with right now is just go ahead and talk about it. And then you now find a platform like this. Then you just go ahead and simplify it. Like right now, I am not speaking in the same way my publications will look like. This is not how you would find my research publications, but now I'm making you understand things better than I would have written them in jargons, as it were. So one of the ways you can then see how to make your research accessible is to leverage speaking opportunities where you maybe speak on shows, you host seminars, you can also collaborate with NGOs. For instance, if you're working on forestry now, there are a couple NGOs. If you're working in the field of forestry, there are a couple NGOs that are working on forest related projects. Yeah, you want to tell them, okay, I did this and I'm happy to speak at a particular seminar that we can actually co-host, so that we can share this information far and wide, so that people can have knowledge of these things and then be able to use them as they deem fit. Now, that is a good opportunity for you to now further communicate your research findings with a broader audience. For the sake of time, I'll try to rush through. Then the next one you also want to do is question and answers. Yeah. So like I'm here, I could easily just organize a call and I theme it based on maybe my research area. And I'm asking people, okay, come around. I'm happy to answer questions you might have related to this topic. Just throw me the question. I worked on something like that and I would happily give answers to. Interestingly, I think I've been on one particular Instagram live having to do with questions and answer around conservation efforts in Nigeria. I think just recently, about 2 weeks ago or so. And that's because I'd worked on something similar and I could share insights. And so when I had the opportunity to, I gracefully accepted and talked about it. And these are ways you can actually use to be able to now share the several things that you have found. But note that it starts first from big ideas. It goes then to making big discoveries, but interestingly, it doesn't end there. It now takes your intentional efforts to be able to share your big discoveries with a wider population for them to better appreciate the efforts that you've put in and the innovation that you've been able to come up with. So let me just quickly ask Janki if she wants to come in first, or I'll just round off mine. I'll just take the second part of the conversation. So Janki, what do you think?
Yeah, you greatly added all the points. I just want to add one thing, that if
All right.
whenever I speak about my research, I just keep one point in my mind, that how can I explain my research to fifth, sixth standard student? So that is the simplest way to explain your research. Just let me give you one example. Before a month, we were presenting our startup in one exhibition, and one student came and asked, "How you make nanomaterials?" Because my research background was nanomaterials. So I just told them, when we make new recipes at home, we add different spices and different food items in specific amount, and we test it after making it. So this is the whole a stepwise process to make a one recipe. The same way we can make nanomaterials with different adding chemicals, surfactants, and all. So this is just a small example. The same way we can show our results in a simply manner to society so they can relate. And I always see research with three stakeholders. So one we are as a researcher, second one is industry, and third one is general public. So for industry, we our presentation can be in a different way, but in society we always have to keep mind that we can make as simple as possible so they can get to know about that innovation and they can use. So mostly all these points are included in allowance. Thank you.
All
Yes, you
right,
want
yeah,
to.
thank you very much, Janki, for that contribution. So the next thing I really want to look at right now that is also key to your big ideas. Yeah, one thing that is also key to your making big discoveries is the fact that you need to also consider how do we bridge knowledge gaps. Yeah, and that is one of the things that I'm really particular about. And if you see maybe my bio somewhere else, you would always try to find this science policy practice interface. Yeah, and that's because there are existing knowledge gaps. And I alluded to it earlier on when I said there are a lot of research works in your undergraduate repository. For instance, there are interesting findings that have just been left in a particular cupboard or in just one room. And then what is in those documents is completely dissociated from what is obtainable on the ground. It's also completely disconnected from what policymakers in that particular field are talking about. Decision makers are not even aware that there is something like that. So it now begs the question, how then do we connect or bridge all of these knowledge gaps that we have? People in the academia are working in quotes independently. People in the field who are practicing are also working independently, and the policymakers are just busy doing whatever it is that they please. Now, this is not supposed to be so, and this is particular to developing countries and least developed countries, where you just even have very limited funding to research, and researchers are just busy doing theirs, and um, okay. Researchers are just busy doing theirs. Researchers are just busy doing theirs. Policymakers are busy discussing other things. And then you just see that there is just this disconnect between what we are doing and what is actually happening on the ground. Then it begs the question, what are the strategies that we can use to really transform all these insights that we get from research into relatable everyday life content or implications? Then to achieve that, one of the things you want to do is that your innovations, your discoveries must be connected to real world problems. Yeah, your innovations must be connected to real world problems. And this has been simplified in such a way that we now have the sustainable development goals. Yeah. Now, I don't think at this point in time there is any breakthrough innovation you will come up with or any research you would carry out that you cannot connect the outcome, the implication of that research to one or more of the sustainable development goals. Now, that is one perfect way to be able to tie your research to real world problems. So if you're just doing something that doesn't have implication on the ground, then it might not find relevance in this current age. Yeah. So you want to be able to connect your research findings. How does your finding, yeah, how does your innovation in material science lead to improvement right now? What change on the ground can be caused by your identifying nature-based solutions? For instance, your development of clean cooking strategies, what are the implications that it has? For instance, I came up with an innovation. I investigated a particular community or a village, as it were. I saw that one of the problems they had was health related, lungs related, because of their exposure to um, coal, the exposure to smoke and everything in between. And then we came up with an innovation of having to use clean cook stove and everything. Now, you want to now connect it, because by saying I've come up with an innovation of having to design clean cook stove, people just feel like, okay, clean cook stove. So what about it? You need to be able to tell us that a number of persons have had so and so health implications as a result of this particular mode of cooking. And so this innovation has the chance to limit whatever disease that was identified by 65%, by 70%. Now you're giving us a problem that is being solved. You're proposing a solution that is scientifically tested and proven. And so you are addressing real world problems. So this is one thing that I would always recommend. You come here and at the end of the day you tell us that I'm sorry, I'm just finding it hard to use very simple examples from the top of my head, and you just come and you're like, okay, so we've lost about 50% of the biodiversity in southwestern Nigeria. To the common person, it begs the question, so what? Yeah. What does it mean to lose 50% of biodiversity in a particular region? So you need to help them understand that this biodiversity is what is responsible for the support of life and livelihoods within that particular place. And without them, this and that are the implications. Connect it to real world problems. Let the people see that there is a problem and then this is a solution. One other thing you want to do is you need to learn to simplify complex concepts. Yeah, you need to simplify. Once we talk as researchers, we oftentimes use jargons, and it's. I don't deny that it's always a big deal having to simplify those jargon into simpler terms that people can understand. Because I think one of the challenges that I was having one time, I was supposed to engage with a particular community, and then it begs the question: how then do you explain climate change to somebody that is in a part of Nigeria, maybe one village in Ogun State? How do you explain climate change? Is there a word for that? And then at some point at the dialogue at the UNFCCC, and then it was a conversation of, because I worked with indigenous peoples and these people are really locals. And then it begs the question, how then do we come up with a term for indigenous people to know things like climate adaptation, to know things like indigenous knowledge, to know things like nature-based solutions? So it can be a really big deal. But rather than having simple terms, it's okay to explain or break down these terms further. I think there's a way in Yoruba, one of the languages in Nigeria, one of the languages in Nigeria here, that we've been able to simplify what climate change is. And then when you explain to somebody, they better understand. So it's important for you to learn how to just simplify all of these complex concepts, make it relatable, make it understandable, such that the public can better understand it. And when you're giving out output like this, I saw a particular short publication. They made a research outcome, yeah, into what you call these comics. Yeah, then we're familiar with super strikers and the like. So they just summarized the research outcome into comics. Just two persons played the entire role, just giving conversations, and you could very much tell what the research was about and what the outcome was and the implication. And that was really profound, in my opinion. So we must also learn to leverage infographics. I tried to do something of the sort, I think quite recently, and it will be found on my LinkedIn feed. So one very bulky research, I simplified it into one page. And that's one thing about infographic. Infographic can just have text. It can also have just pictures. You could have maps. You could have graphs. That if I look at it just once, I might understand, or the general public can easily understand what it is that we are talking about. That's one thing about using infographics here. So you can leverage infographics to communicate your research discoveries to the general population, and then they can better understand it. One other thing that you want to do is your research, like I said, is supposed to be the start of something. And this is what I mean. So, for instance, I go to a particular community, I carry out an investigation, and in the course of my investigation, I identified three challenges related to ecosystem management that that community is facing, or that region is facing. The next thing I want to do now is that I have identified a problem. It just shouldn't stop at the identification of that problem. Now, I want to communicate that problem to the relevant stakeholders that can address it if I am just limited to research. But because For instance, now I work both at research, at the intersection of research and development. So I can use the findings of my research to design another proposal for a project implementation. Now, I don't know if you get it. So if you're working within a field, yeah, and you came up with a breakthrough discovery, now you've discovered it. At best, what you can have is a design. Yeah. Now, from having a design, you can go ahead to come up with a prototype. Now, you can use your prototype together with a proposal to secure a grant for you to now build several copies of what you had designed as a prototype. Now, that's for people who are in code, for instance, building. For some of us who maybe work with communities and work with other stakeholders to address environmental and climate related problems, what we do is that we go into a community, for instance, we identify the problem. At the end of the day, your research will present the problems that we saw, we investigated and found. Now, after doing that, you've seen the problem. Then what you want to do next, that problem would be the basis for a project proposal. Now, so I've identified that these communities they are undergoing, for instance, let me just use this simple example. They are undergoing rather heavy forest degradation. Yeah, so maybe there's deforestation that is ongoing there, and the reason for that is because the people rely heavily on logs, they rely heavily on wood, so they have to deforest. That's like their major source of livelihood. And then I've identified those problems. The next thing I can do from there is to use those problems to design a proposal and go ahead to seek for funding such that I can now implement an afforestation project within that community. I can also go ahead to implement a project for sustainable livelihoods such that the people can stop deforestation and have other means of livelihood. Now, to do that, I just come up with the project proposal. I lay credence to the research I've done and the findings I did from there. I draw up a budget that it will cost to now implement this afforestation project. I draw up a budget that it will cost to be able to design a project on sustainable livelihoods. And then I look for a wonderful funder. I tailor my proposal to the need of the funder or to the scope of the funder's work. And then the next thing I want to do from there is just apply. And the good thing is you can go from just doing a simple research to getting thousands of dollars to implement another project that addresses a problem within the community that that research took place. So we need to begin to see research beyond just churning out output, just churning out results, and at the end of the day, it doesn't have implications on the lives of people. Yeah. So one way to bridge this knowledge gap is beyond just identifying problems, propose solutions either by yourself. For those who work at the intersection of research and development, you can do all by yourself, just get partners and stakeholders and fine. But if you're just working within research alone, you can give to others your research outputs, partner with them, they can collaborate with you since it's your finding, then they can use that to design a project, seek for funding, and implement it. Majority of the problems that we have in our surroundings are things that we can investigate and then design solutions for. And that's why you see that projects are not just implemented on the basis of I'm passionate about addressing this problem. It has to be evidence-based. If you're coming to say you're proposing a project to address climate change in a particular city, what is the evidence that there is climate change affecting people in that city? Research represents that to you. Then from research, take the findings to the funders, design a project that is more like an intervention, and then get money to do that. And then you would be able to bridge the gap quite solidly. One of the things you want to do is to partner with relevant communicators. Yeah. Interestingly, some media houses are open. For instance, you work on material science, you work on environmental pollution. There are media houses who, from time to time, discuss issues around environmental pollution, and then you could be invited. Even if you're not invited, you could send a proposal and say, "This is what you worked on, and you'll be happy to speak on this." And then that's an opportunity for you to talk about it. Sorry, just give me a minute. The Hamatan here is affecting me. Yeah, just sorry.
Lawrence, you are mute maybe.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I just noticed that. So one other thing you want to do at the end of the day is from time to time you see how to connect all these dots together to establish precedents for you in a particular field and to be able to tell the story of what you've been working on, how that you've been moving from problems to solutions, how that you've been engaging different stakeholders. And these things are possible. You wouldn't know except you give it a shot. So from just churning out ideas and then churning out research outputs, see how to leverage all of these ideas I've shared, engage with relevant stakeholders, communicate your findings, use the findings that you have from every innovative research, be it the fact that you came up with a design, come up with a prototype, use that prototype to engage in conferences, engage at workshops where you can meet relevant partners, where you can collaborate to establish a project. I have a colleague who, interestingly, he's one of those in Tanzania right now who is known for this clean cooking stove. Yeah. So he came up with a project and then at the end of the day designed the clean cooking stove, which actually is a problem in rural communities of Tanzania. And right now he's gotten funding with a couple of organizations and bodies. Now I can't remember if they are German funders right now or French, I can't remember. But now it's now a wide scale project, which perhaps started from a prototype. Yeah. So you could come up with something, identify a problem, and the next thing is that maybe there's a need for wisdom. People have in that like manner come up with strategies for waste collection. People have come up with strategies for waste recycling in that same manner. People have been able to get funding to implement regional based projects. Some are just community level projects. And these are things that you need to you consider. Your ideas are valid, which are very important. That's like the start of it all. Your discoveries are also very important, but much more than that. Communicate these things with relevant stakeholders, and beyond that, see how that you can transform these great discoveries to implementing solutions on the ground with the right partners, with the right people. Your research can be the start of something big. I hope it has been rewarding having to listen to all of these conversations. Before I yield to Janki, I will just say that if you have questions related to everything I've said, you can as well note them down. I'll be back on the call after Janki is done with her own conversation, and we'll be happy to address some of your questions and concerns. So over to you, Janki.
Yes, thank you, Lawrence. So I don't have anything to add in this topic because you have included everything. So yeah, can
Yeah,
I
I don't know
start with?
if you know that your camera is not on, or you want to leave it as such.
Sorry.
All right,
Yeah,
all right.
yeah. Thank you. Yeah. So let me give you a brief about myself first. So I have done my master in physics, then PhD in applied physics in nanomaterials, and after that I have done postdoctorate in again on nanomaterials in some different applications, hydrophobic, and then now I'm running two startups in which we are trying to help global research communities like us. So let me tell you some importance about uh, doing a collaboration. So I think in whole research journey as a researcher or any field, collaboration is must and most important thing. I find it in my 7 to 8 years of research experience. So basically, why this collaboration is important for a researcher, especially because I think so. It will give you a broad prospect of your research. You can go for interdisciplinary research. So I'll give you my example with each point. So I am from basically a pure physics background, and when I joined PhD in applied physics is application based physics, and I have started working on nanomaterials. So synthesizing or making nanomaterials for semiconducting chip or anything, so you should have to knowledge about physics, chemistry, some of mechanical parts and everything. But I have the only knowledge of physics. So at that time, collaboration is must. And I worked with so many researchers from chemistry background and mechanical. So this collaboration is most important part for researchers, and you can easily find it for ResearchGate, LinkedIn, and we are also making one platform for that also. And I suggest all researchers to go for as many as conferences, workshops, events like this, and also uh, yeah. So there are so many workshops happening in worldwide. So you can attend it. So you can get the better knowledge of how you can improve your research side, and you can go for the collaboration also. So you get to know so many researchers around the globe, and you get to know their perspective about research and everything. And the best thing about rich collaboration I found is that it will help you to generate a proper idea and knowledge about your research things. So I have started working on making nanomaterials. But after making nanomaterials, what? So one of my collaborators has suggested me that we can use this nanomaterial in solar cell to cool down this application part. So he was from mechanical background, and one chemistry guy suggested me to make a different type of nanomaterials. So we three in collaboration made different type of nanomaterials which was used in semiconductor chip and then solar cells and many more. So collaboration is also helpful to use different resources also. So let me give you this clarity about this. Sorry, my voice is breaking because I have throat infection. Sorry all. So there are so many research labs all over around the world, but no one has all the facilities in their lab. So if you are working in any university or any college, you have some of lab facilities at your place. But if you want to use other facilities, then what? So that's why collaboration is most important part. So you can collaborate with different researchers, professors, scientists, even industries. So you can use their resources also with knowledge. So using research resources is the most important part in research, in any type of research. So you can also get help for co-authorship, and you can use network of them also. So I think collaboration is most important thing, and everyone. So let me give you one my thing. So when I started my master, I didn't know anything about PhD because there are no one in my friend is doing research or anything. So I get to know about one professor. I met them. I attended some of conferences with them, and I get the exposure about research. And I found interest in nanomaterials. After that, I start networking. Even I go for around 5 to 7 workshops and events, and I found one professor who has open position at that time, Indian National Laboratory of India. So I sent my SOPs to them. I met him regularly 2 3 times, and I showed my interest in this position. And after clearing entrance, they selected me as a PhD candidate. But in my PhD, as I told earlier that my PhD work is totally based on collaboration. I have worked with different 10 to 12 collaborators worldwide. One was in France. He was helping me to review my paper and give me suggestion because he had expertise in writing paper. So this is also one type of collaboration you can use. Then after completing my PhD, I got postdoctorate in again a National Laboratory of India, is IPR. So in my PhD time, I have worked with so many different professor, and one professor had a network at this institute. So he connected me to that professor, and he reviewed my research, and I gave interview and everything, and I get postdoctorate there. So the collaboration is most important part. I can say that. So Lawrence, can you add some points? I just can share my experience.
Right. Maybe to add to that, yeah. I think you've hit the nail on the head. It's just I would come in the aspect of there is what we call transdisciplinarity. Yeah, transdisciplinarity, and it's essential right now in research, because two things: you don't have all of the knowledge, And for you to create something that is very impactful, you need a knowledge that is beyond your own field alone. Yeah. So you need the knowledge of people in other field. And that's why when you look at a problem from a broad perspective, you would automatically see that that problem requires the expertise of a sociologist. That problem requires the expertise of an engineer. And that problem requires the expertise of someone in environmental science. Now, that problem can be as simple as maybe the problem of flooding and how it's affecting the livelihoods of people. As simple as that problem feels or look, we want to talk of innovations like flood barriers. If you're looking at flood barriers, who best can discuss or maybe propose things related to flood barriers than engineers? If you want to understand the livelihoods of people and how they manage and all of these things, you need sociologists to explain it better. And then you need an environmental scientist to understand the dynamics of the environment. So somehow, to make your research more impactful, rather, you need to look at it broadly and see how those people who are relevant to addressing that problem, then bring them together. Then one other aspect of transdisciplinarity is that science itself does not have all of the knowledge alone. So sometimes you might even have to collaborate with the locals. Yeah. So you collaborate with the locals such that at the end of the day, the results that you get is relevant to them, and any project that is being done is co-owned by the locals as well, so that it can be a part of the innovation. It's more like saying you go to the locals to address their own problems without involving them. Yeah, so we have this concepts where we call co-production of knowledge. Yeah, so science itself doesn't have all of the knowledge. You engage with the local people such that you can bring ideas together to co-create, to co-propose, to co-develop, and to co-address different challenges. So yeah, that's just the addition I wanted to give to highlight the importance of collaboration. Yeah, over to you, Janki.
Yeah, and I want to add one point here also. So collaboration with industry also a very important thing. So next topic is also related to that. Sorry. So becoming industry ready. So basically, if you are working at any laboratory in your master, PhD, or anything, so industry doesn't want to work on any theory or anything. They just look for application part. So first of all, your research should be around any application, and society can use this application. And at the same time, if you have worked at any, I always suggest to do internship to all the students after their master, because you can get the mindset of how you can work in industry. So industry is totally working on your research mindset. So they always look for your transferable skills. So if you're in engineering or science background, you know about your research, and obviously you can do best at that point. But they show transferable skills like data analysis, project management. They always look for how you can manage your project. So in my PhD time, I was working in a practical part. So the project, one project is around 12 to 14 hours. So I should have all the project management part, that after this objective, which objective I should go for, and which methodology I have to use, and after that how I can analyze data. So these all the skills industry look for, and with this problem solving, as we know that. Uh, so with that, when we work in any academic projects, so TRL level is around 1 to 3. TRL means technology readiness level. So technology readiness level means your research, how much your research is applicable to society. So this is identified by 1 to 9 numbers. So in number one, TRL is your basic researcher. Your research is a very basic in theory part. Then when you go till the 9, it will be applicable. 9 is most applicable where society use this application. So in academia, what we always see that uh, TRL, technology readiness level, is around 1 to 3. So our research only keep in laboratories only. It mostly 90 to 95% our research is not applicable to society, because we don't check it for scalable and production things. So if I have made any a nanomaterial. But if it is useful for industry or society or not, and if I have made any nanomaterial, this methodology is useful for industry or not. I have made in laboratory for a small amount. But if they can make this nanomaterial in scalable method with the same technology, then it will be helpful for industry also and then society also. So we were working in with one uh, cream, nanomaterial based cream. So we have made it in our laboratory. But the same methodology is useful for this industry or not. And after industries make it in a scalable pattern, then society will use it. So this gap is very big recently in all over the world, and we are working in this in our startup. Said how we can change these TRL levels. So for these academic industry projects are most important. So for this, you should obviously know your transferable skills, and then you can work on an IP and patents. So industry buy these IP or patents, so they can work on your IP or patents as a they buy it. So this is the engagement with industry. So researchers can basically work on patents, IP, or researchers with the industry also in their internship and projects and many things. So yeah, uh, so let me give you one thing, one point that in my startup, we have two startups. So one is Codots and other is Researcher.ai. So in Codots, what we do, as I told that we are connecting researchers to resources. So to laboratories, but in Researcher, in our this second one startups, we help researchers like us to connect with industries. So how they can work on industrial projects, or if any researchers have any project in their mind, then how they can collaborate with industries. Because the most important thing in research is to bridge this gap, obviously the knowledge gap and everything, but how your application or research can connect with industry and society. So for that, researchers should have some skills. Like if you are working in any computational skill, then you should have knowledge about some tools. There are so many AI tools right now in the market for simulation, for biology, chemistry, and every aspects. And if you are working in an experimental things, then you should know the lab resources management and some SOPs for that and everything. So yeah, Lawrence, you can add some points here.
Yeah, maybe I'll first say that now you've shared a lot of incredible insights, I must say, as to becoming industry ready. Something that I would also take home, I must say, and I believe that others also find it very insightful. One of the things that maybe I would add to being industry ready is all of the things I had talked about earlier on. I think you can paint a picture of yourself as industry ready if you have evidence-based performances that you can do all of these things. And that's the importance rather of documentation. Yeah. So as you're making these efforts, as you're doing these things, there should be a level of documentation across board. Yeah. Either you have that on your personal profile, maybe on the LinkedIn has been very professional. So you can use that as a repository for all of these things that you've done, all of these things you've achieved, how you've engaged with the public. From just one research, you can have several conversations on it, your field experience, more like all of the things I've discussed earlier. But do a documentation. If you have a personal website, that's good for you. And if you have more like your general social media platforms, that can also be used. So you can just use that to document all of your efforts, all of your engagements with industry, all of the works that you've done. And then anytime you share that link with any industry partner, perhaps, or you share that with a potential organization with whom you want to intern, you can look through that and indeed vouch for your credibility, because that is more like an evidence of the several things that you have done. And then one last thing I would say is that oftentimes than not, we want to get into the industry and we are only making efforts to get into the industry by maybe applying, just reaching out to industry partners and everything. But beyond making effort to get into the industry, what experience within the industry are you building, even from the comfort of your homes? Because you can sit by yourself. For instance, Janki talked about some soft skills and hard skills that you should develop, yeah, data analytics and everything in between. Now, if you have to do that, some of us are waiting to find projects, or we are waiting to find industries before we start doing analytical things. Meanwhile, you can decide to work on analytical projects yourself, even without being given. Work on something, just you can come up with an issue, especially if you're not doing a very Herculean laboratory exercise that will be cost intensive. Sometimes there are a lot of repository for data you can find online. Go there, get the data, process it, analyze it, just do something about. And that's the thing about research. Yeah, for quasi research that doesn't follow the academic standard, it's just for you to find data, interpret it, manipulate it, come up with a result, and then present it in a simple form that people would understand. Keep on doing that. You're refining your skill. You're making people see your area of interest and your area of expertise. And over the years, when the opportunity you want then comes your way, it begs the question, are you ready? Now, those things would be a testament of the fact that you're ready to grab those opportunities. And I think this is where I might just bring it to a close. I'll ask if Janki would have anything to add. Um, Otherwise, we can as well just
No, we
use
can.
it.
Yeah, we can proceed with question answers that would be more interactive and yeah.
All right, perfect. So we can have the admin of Resonance take over from here, and if there are questions, we can go ahead to answer them. Thank you. Over to you, Laughter.
Wow, wow, wow. That was an amazing and thought-provoking session. Thank you so much, Lawrence, and thank you, Dr. Janki. And it's been inspiring so far. And I've been trying to follow, the conversation and how Lawrence started with, our research should not just be for research sake, it should be tied to a purpose. You mentioned specifically that it should lead to actionable change. And you also talked about tailored accessibility. Dr. Janki spoke about collaboration and also, the idea of storytelling, which means so much to us as Resonance, because one of the research we conducted, we found out that, people study, like there was a study that showcased that 9% of people found it hard to resonate with data and statistics, but like about a large chunk of them, could remember the stories. And that's the part where you mentioned about storytelling, making it relatable to daily life, to relatable things around. It speaks so much value, and we really value that, because accessibility is really what we are about at Resonance, and we love how this conversation has allowed us to see in depth how we could solve this problem better. And I also love how this conversation has also helped people who underscore, who happen to be researchers, how they can position themselves and use their research to make meaningful impact. And we really value and appreciate all of this. Thank you so much. And so without further ado, I don't know if anybody on the call has any question for our speaker. You can please drop them in the chat or maybe signify, and then you could ask your question briefly, please. Is there anyone on the call who has a question, please? Would love to have that as quick as possible. And you could just, okay, all right. I'm seeing Ayodeji Dennis. So Dennis is asking that why do you think there's often a disconnect between academic research and everyday life? So I don't know who's going to go for this, but that's the question we have at hand currently.
Janki, do you want to go for that?
Yeah, because yeah, this is really a good question. Everyone is always all researchers are thinking about this only. So basically, academic research, as I told, we always do in lab scenario. We don't think it's on a large scale, our everyday life. So our research is like, hello, I'm audible.
Yes, you
Yes,
are.
yes,
Yes, you
yes.
are.
Yeah. So when we work on any research, we always first think about the everyday life application. So in my first research, I have made this mistake. I worked on something for a year and 2 years, then I found that this is not applicable on large scale. I cannot collaborate with industry on this topic. So after that, I have switched this. So I think so. Selection of topic and your working scenario and methodology often restrict you to go your research into everyday life or a industry. So I think these two main objectives.
Yeah, thanks, Janki. I also think in addition to that, one of the challenge we face is the fact that the academia and practice institutions actually do work in silos. And so one of the things I alluded to in my conversation earlier on. So you see somebody in the academia, if they're working independently. The policymakers, if they're deciding on policies and everything, oftentimes they're working independently. NGOs or civil society organizations or industries, if they're working independently. But we should see research as an opportunity to collaborate with all of these partners and then get them involved. Now, the good thing about it, and one thing I have learned, and I think particularly from my master's thesis and engagements with different stakeholders, is that if, as a researcher, you carry all of these stakeholders along from the very onset, they would, at the end of the day, be also interested in the output as much as you are interested in the output. So, for instance, and maybe this might apply to those that are working on interdisciplinary research or those who are working on quite social relevant research. Yeah, because if I'm carrying out an investigation, one of the key stakeholders will be perhaps the government or government institution. If I'm working, depending on the ministry that is relevant, I may also want to engage, for instance, the Ministry of Environment, the Ministry of Forestry. I may also identify key industry companies or organizations that do things related to what I want to investigate. Then I identify all of those stakeholders. Now, in the course of my research, I would ensure to have a consultation with those stakeholders. It doesn't even have to mean all of them, but with selected stakeholders across this spectrum. Now, when I have a consultation with this person, I tell them this is what I intend working on. And we are also engaging you to be able to contribute to the outcome of this research. So I engage the stakeholder in the Ministry of Environment, I engage the stakeholder in a particular company, I engage the stakeholder in a particular civil society organization. At the end of the day, it's always with the notion that the findings from that research will now be communicated because they will be ready to receive these findings because they also contributed to it. Yeah. So since they are ready to receive it, then you give it to them, and this can contribute to other form of engagement. Because of these contributions, I've had opportunities to speak at relevant engagement that is outside of the academia based on that form of collaboration. So we need to see research as beyond just working in silos, engaging partners so that they are part of it from the onset. People don't just want to be part of things that have just ended. For instance, I did something, I found something, and I just throw it at them. But if before I carry it out, I'm like, come join me. This is what we want to look at. And these are the things we are expecting to see. This is what it will affect. Now, when we carry people along from the very beginning, then they'll be glad to be part of the outcome and then they'll be happy to implement it. So yeah, I think that's just my contribution
I
to that
just
question.
want to add one thing here. So I found that there are two type of research projects people are working on. One is first you select topic and then work on it, and other one is industry has a problem and you work on that. So in I'm from India, so currently Indian government is focusing on academic industry projects. So industry define the objectives which they are facing and which people are facing, and academia working on that. So this is the directly daily life applications people are working on currently.
Thank you for that apt response, Dr. Janki and Lawrence. Ayodeji Dennis, I hope you got a satisfying response already. And so here I have another question from Bamidele James, and it says, how can we help the next generation of researchers, especially undergraduates and graduates, to avoid showpieces and prioritize outcomes more than output? That's the next question. I don't know if Lawrence would go first or Dr. Jackie. Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Thank you very much. Now, I think this is quite of a systemic problem, in my opinion, because my experience across maybe the undergraduate and postgraduate level has revealed a number of things. So for some persons, like I would say, and you can't exactly blame them. There is the culture with which they have been raised, and many students are not exactly interested in research, and you can't hold their necks to that. So at the end of the day, they just want that showpieces, like you said, just something that shows that they've done a research, and it can be a criteria for them to move out of the university as graduates. Yeah, it might be hard to change that. Yeah, because not everybody is interested in research. So that might be a thing. But one other thing that should be considered, this is relevant, this point now is relevant to academic institutions. Yeah, there should be a criteria to certify you as a researcher. And of course, this is what I experienced as an undergraduate. The criteria that you would have to fulfill to make you complete your dissertation is much less than the criteria you would have to satisfy for you to proceed as having a master's degree. So the criteria were not that stringent when I did my bachelor's, although I did pretty well in my opinion. I completed it. But then at the master's level, I found that some of the things that I considered were well enough there, based on the structure that existed in the school from which I completed my master's degree. Then I figured that it could be more stringent. Yeah. So it is now for institutions to put in relevant criteria. If your dissertation or thesis or project, however it is called, does not meet a particular benchmark, you may not be allowed to graduate. Now that's the thing. But you would as well understand that not everybody who is finishing a bachelor's degree wants to go into research. And that's why I believe that they make it flexible, yeah, such that you don't have to do a top tier research for you to be able to pass, so to say. But at master's degree, they raise the bar a bit, yeah, such that you have to go through really serious processes to be able to move on from there. Now, these are criteria that have been set up by institutions. And that is why you see that at the end of the day, if you're doing a PhD, yeah, the criteria is also higher than when you do a master's, because they expect that as a PhD, you're expected to, as a PhD candidate, you're expected to be a certified researcher. You should know the nuances of research. And at the end of the day, you're not just coming out with, this is what I found. Your work must have outcome. And that's where we move from outputs to outcomes, and then from outcomes to impacts. Yeah, and it's one of the things you will learn in research, that your research output doesn't just stop at output, but it begs the question, beyond output, what is the outcome of your research? And then what is the impact of your research? So I think along the ladder from bachelor's degree up onto the doctoral program, I believe that the criteria actually increases. But now, if you find people, or if you are a person who is interested in research, then you would of course be doing yourself a great disservice if you're just all about just generating things, just having showpieces like Bamidele has said. You would not have to take intentional efforts to do all of the things that we've recommended. Institutions must do well to set the standard. They must have the bars high, so that the people who would come out of those institutions as graduates can indeed say that they are competent in research. And then people who want to really go into research must do their due diligence to ensure that they give it time, they go through the process, they make sure that it's just beyond the appearance of it, but the depth and impact of the work that is being done. So it's on those two fronts I can address that question. So yeah, thank you. I don't know if Janki has an additional response to that.
No, no, I'm good.
Okay, thank you so much for that response, Lawrence. And I could really pick like the intentional effort. It's about intentional effort on the part of the universities, these universities, the administration, to ensure that they set a benchmark for students to meet up with. And I believe that there also has to be a kind of reorientation about our attitude towards research, because I actually lived this experience. You see so many undergraduates just do research just anyhow. Even they claim they go for data collection and all, and meanwhile it was just AI that helped them to, come up with these informations, and they actually graduated out of school. So I believe that there has to be an effort, from university stakeholders, and also a kind of like reorientation that should happen in the minds of people, that even though you don't want to pursue a profession, while you're doing your research, you're actually grooming yourself, critical thinking, analyzing data and all of that. It's actually beneficial for whatever part you want to venture in your career. And we know what the future work is saying, that these skills are actually very vital for the future. So thank you so much for that response. And the next question that I have from Elizabeth Ayomide, I would love Janki to do justice to this. So Elizabeth is
Yes.
asking, okay, thank you, Janki. As a researcher, what qualities or skills makes one stand out to industry leaders and government parastatals? So, Dr. Janki, over to you.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Thank you. Yeah, so I must say, to work in industry, you must have first of all deep technical knowledge or expertise of your field. And other than that, how you will manage failure and projects both. So research is so much about uh, working on same thing repeatedly, because it's not like when you started to working on one project and you will get the results what you actually want. So working with failure, handle the failure, and your expertise knowledge, how you will manage projects and how you will work in collaboration with interdisciplinary researchers with your team. So I think so this is the most important thing. So if you sometimes if you don't have any skill, then you can learn it, but some skills you can't learn working in the project. You should know how you will handle failures and manage projects both at the same times. So I think this is the most important thing to work in any project, industry, government, anywhere. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much for that response, Dr. Janki. And Elizabeth, I hope you also had a satisfying response to your question. So, once again, I'd love to say a big thank you to everyone who has been part of this conversation since it started. I don't know if we can, just respond with an emoji to just see that we've been following. I really appreciate our time and our consistency staying through the conversation. And once again, I'd love to say a big thank you to our amazing speakers, to Lawrence and to Dr. Janki. We really appreciate you. So at this point, I would love to encourage everyone who is on this call to not just end this conversation here. And I believe that the goal of this conversation is to just help us build a momentum, because we know that it doesn't just end with ideas. It's about how we, thank you, Dr. Janki, for sharing that. It's about how we ensure distribution, how we ensure that our research, there's intentional effort to make actionable change with the research that we do, and also storytelling and all of that. And also this conversation has also helped researchers, which Lawrence spoke about today, on how they could position themselves well by making their research work impactful. So like I would love to employ everyone on this call to share what you've learned, and on our socials, share with your network, work. And also, I'm going to share a link to our pages. You should follow us on all our social media platform because we have a lot in store for the world, for researchers, for people who love brilliant and bold ideas. So you should follow us on our socials to get more value from us in the coming days. And so now I would love to give the mic to Isaac Oyedele to give us a concluding to conclude the session for us. Thank you, Isaac. Please, you can take the mic.
Thank you so much, Laughter. Thank you for that. Dr. Janki, Lawrence, thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for the insights, great insight, great value shared. I mean, it has been so awesome. What a wonderful time. It has been so valuable so far, and I really enjoyed this discussion. And thank you so much to everyone who took their time to join and listen. I mean, I believe you have been, you have enjoyed a lot. You've enjoyed a lot of value. You've enjoyed a lot of, great insight, and I really appreciate it. And thank you so much, everyone. And yeah,
Yeah.
so Lawrence shared his LinkedIn profile right in the comments section, and Dr. Janki also shared us. So you would want to follow them on LinkedIn and also the Resonance socials. I mean, I encourage you to do that. You'll find a lot of value there in their profiles on their pages. Thank you so much, everyone. I wish you a great day ahead.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you,
Have a great.
everyone.
Yeah,
Thank
thank
you.
you and have a wonderful day.
Bye, everyone.